They thought it was over. The skies had gone quiet, the stars calm again after weeks of chaos. The invading armada that once filled the night with fire had been shattered, retreating into the void. On their homeworld, they sang songs of victory, believing they had faced humanity's best and survived. Their leaders stood before crowds, declaring that Earth's defenses had been broken and that the danger was gone. They didn't know the truth. Not yet. What they destroyed wasn't humanity's main force. It wasn't even close. It was just one fleet, one test, and the next wave was already on its way. The first fleet was small but fierce, an exploratory defense unit sent to scout and assess the threat. It wasn't designed for conquest, only for deterrence, but when it engaged the alien invaders near Jupiter's orbit, it hit far harder than expected. The invaders lost dozens of ships before finally overwhelming Earth's formation through sheer numbers. They celebrated the destruction of the Terran fleet as a victory worthy of legend. Across their empire, they spread stories of how they had crushed the humans, how Earth had dared to resist and failed. What they didn't understand was that humanity never fought with everything it had. The first fleet was never meant to win. It was meant to send a message back home. And that message was simple. They're coming. Back on Earth, deep beneath the surface of the Pacific Command Station, leaders watched the data from that first battle. They saw the enemy's tactics, the weapon signatures, the formation patterns. The faces around the command table were grim, but not hopeless. Humanity had expected losses. What mattered was what they learned, and they learned enough. The defeated fleet had transmitted every fragment of information it could before being destroyed. Coordinates, frequencies, weak points, all wrapped into a final burst of code that reached Earth seconds before silence. For days, no one spoke much in the command center. They just worked. Every nation on Earth, every remaining orbital dock, every secret shipyard under the ice of Europa and the deserts of Mars came alive again. The project had a name whispered among the engineers and strategists: Operation Retribution. But outside of Earth's core defense network, no one really knew what it meant. The governments called it a defensive restructuring, a way to calm the population. But the truth was more dangerous. Humanity wasn't planning to defend anymore. It was planning to strike back. The alien empire had underestimated Earth from the beginning. To them, humans were divided, primitive, still scarred from their own wars and political struggles. They saw a species constantly arguing, endlessly distracted and emotionally fragile. But they missed the one thing that made humans truly dangerous: their ability to adapt. When threatened, humanity didn't surrender. It evolved. Weeks after the destruction of the first fleet, quiet transmissions began to ripple through the dark space between planets. Huge orbital shipyards, once believed abandoned after the global resource crisis, reactivated. Underneath old colonies, deep manufacturing vaults powered on again. And on the far side of the moon, a construction field began assembling something massive. The workers didn't know all the details. No one did. Not even the scientists. Everything was compartmentalized, divided by clearance levels and encryption layers. But they all shared a quiet sense of purpose. The first fleet may have fallen, but Earth would never bow. Meanwhile, the invaders were already planning their return. In their vast capital, beneath skies lit by twin suns, they held ceremonies to mark their triumph over Earth. Their war leaders stood proudly before endless ranks of soldiers, promising a full invasion soon. To them, humanity was finished. Their analysts concluded that Earth could not possibly recover from the loss of its fleet so quickly. They believed their next attack would meet no real resistance, and so they delayed, basking in celebration and arrogance, giving humanity exactly what it needed: time. And time was all Earth required. The second phase of Operation Retribution began in silence. No broadcasts, no announcements, no leaks. Not even the civilians knew what was being prepared. The new fleet, codenamed Tenfold, was unlike anything ever built before. 10 ships, each one the size of a small city, each powered by experimental fusion cores and armed with rail systems capable of firing kinetic rounds at near-light speed. But beyond the weapons and armor, what made them truly terrifying was what they carried inside: human determination, sharpened by loss. The crews were handpicked from survivors of the first battle, people who had seen the enemy up close and lived to tell the story. They were no longer fighting just for survival, they were fighting for justice. In the quiet corridors of the flagship, the atmosphere was heavy. The crew didn't talk much. Their faces told enough. Every one of them had someone they'd lost in the first encounter. Some had seen friends vanish in the flash of plasma fire. Others had listened helplessly as entire squadrons went silent. Now, as the engines hummed to life, they carried all those memories like armor. Humanity's vengeance didn't roar with fury, it whispered with purpose. When the alien scouts finally detected movement near the edge of their controlled space, they couldn't believe it. The readings were too large, too powerful. They thought it was an error. After all, Earth shouldn't have been capable of such a response so quickly. But the data didn't lie. The energy signatures were real, and they were coming straight toward them. Panic spread across their command network. Their leaders, still celebrating their supposed victory, were suddenly pulled back into emergency sessions. They ordered their fleets to mobilize again, but it was too late. Humanity's ships were already there, silent in the dark, waiting. The tenfold fleet didn't announce its presence with threats or messages. There were no speeches, no declarations of war, just silence. And then light. The first strike came without warning, a blinding flash that tore through their front lines. The aliens never even got the chance to prepare. Ship after ship vanished from their scanners, consumed by kinetic impacts that traveled faster than anything they'd ever seen. Their communication lines broke down almost instantly. What they had mistaken for weakness turned out to be patience. What they thought was the end of a battle was only the beginning of a war. But even as Earth's fleet advanced, something unexpected began to happen. Deep in the command deck of the flagship, a strange signal started pulsing from the void, faint, rhythmic, almost human. It wasn't from the enemy. It wasn't from any known system. The engineers traced it back to the remains of the first fleet, to one of the ships thought destroyed. Somehow, one vessel had survived, barely, and whatever was inside, it was still transmitting. As the tenfold fleet prepared to move deeper into enemy territory, a choice had to be made. Should they continue their assault, or stop to recover the lost ship and uncover what it was trying to say? The captains stared at the data on the screen, the pulsing signal growing stronger, almost like a heartbeat. Everyone on the bridge waited for his command. No one spoke. Outside, space was silent again, as if holding its breath. Because sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from the enemy ahead, but from what you thought was already gone. And that's where the story truly begins. The bridge was quiet except for the low hum of the ship's systems. The signal flickered across the display, a faint pulse of light among the stars. No one wanted to admit what they were all thinking, that something was wrong. The data didn't make sense. The coordinates showed the signal coming from the debris field of the first fleet, a place that should have been nothing but twisted metal and drifting silence. But the pattern of the transmission, steady, repeating, deliberate, was too precise to be random. Someone or something was sending a message. The captain leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. He'd been part of the first battle, barely surviving when his ship was destroyed. He'd watched friends vanish in flashes of plasma and debris. He knew that area of space better than anyone. "That's where the Vigilant went down," he said quietly. The crew looked at him, waiting for more. If that signal's really from her, then someone's still alive. The idea felt impossible. The Vigilant was one of the first ships destroyed in the initial engagement, blown apart by enemy fire, its reactor going critical as it fell toward Jupiter's orbit. No escape pods were ever recovered. Every record listed the crew as lost, but now a single signal kept repeating, faint but persistent. It was like a ghost refusing to fade. The fleet's command center sent immediate orders to investigate. One of the smaller ships was dispatched to the coordinates, while the main fleet held its position at the edge of enemy space. As the recon vessel approached the debris field, the crew moved cautiously, scanning every fragment. The wreckage drifted like an enormous graveyard, pieces of hull plating slowly spinning, catching the light from a distant sun. The silence was haunting. Inside the wreckage, the scanners finally caught something, energy readings that didn't belong to the debris. Buried beneath layers of broken metal and ice was a faint power signature, weak but stable. The crew worked quickly, using drones to clear a path. When they finally reached the source, the sight froze them in place. It was the Vigilant's main bridge module, cracked, blackened, but intact. The signal was coming from inside. They brought it aboard carefully, sealing the area and running scans for radiation. When the outer hatch opened, the air that escaped was stale, frozen, and silent. Inside, the command deck looked like a tomb. Seats were empty, consoles shattered. But one pod, sealed in the corner of the room, still glowed faintly. Inside it, a single stasis capsule was active. The crew exchanged nervous glances before opening the panel. The system responded with a soft hiss. Inside the capsule was a human, barely alive, suspended in cryo. They rushed the survivor to medical immediately. Days passed before he woke. When he finally opened his eyes, the medics stood back, unsure what to say. He looked pale, his eyes unfocused at first, as if he didn't remember where he was. The first words he spoke were barely a whisper. "You shouldn't have come back." That single sentence sent a chill through the entire ship. The survivor's name was kept classified, but the captain of the Vigilant confirmed his identity. He was the ship's tactical officer, one of the youngest commanders in Earth's defense network. His survival made no sense. He had no memory of how he ended up in cryo, only fragments, an explosion, static, and a strange voice over the comms just before the ship was destroyed. He said it wasn't human, but it wasn't alien either. It was something else. Back on the flagship, the command council gathered to review his report. The recordings from his capsule revealed more than anyone expected. The signal that led them there wasn't just a distress call. It was encrypted with Earth's own communication code, but modified. The encryption method used didn't exist in any of Earth's databases. It was advanced, almost like someone or something had rewritten it. The engineers couldn't explain how. As the investigation deepened, the survivor began to act strangely. He'd often stare out the observation window for hours, barely moving. Sometimes he spoke softly, like answering someone who wasn't there. The medics said it was trauma, but the crew whispered about something else. Some claimed that the energy readings from the wreck had changed slightly after they brought him aboard. Systems glitched more often, lights flickered, and for brief moments the ship's sensors picked up phantom readings in nearby space, echoes that vanished when checked. The captain tried to dismiss it as superstition, but deep down he couldn't shake the unease. He'd seen too much to ignore coincidences. He ordered a detailed analysis of the survivor's cryopod and the energy residue around it. The results came back strange. The power signature didn't match any known human technology. It contained traces of a frequency similar to the aliens' communication array, yet different enough to seem foreign to both sides. Somehow, during the destruction of the Vigilant, human and alien technology had fused in ways no one could explain. The engineers began to suspect that the survivor wasn't just lucky. He might be carrying something within him, something that came back from the first battle. As rumors spread through the fleet, tension grew. Some officers wanted to turn back, arguing that they couldn't risk the mission. Others insisted on continuing the advance, believing that uncovering the truth could give Earth an advantage. But the unease was spreading faster than command could control. The soldiers who once spoke with confidence now moved carefully through the halls, eyes glancing at the ceiling lights that flickered for no reason. Meanwhile, the alien empire had begun to detect movement again. Their long-range sensors picked up human signals near the edge of their colonies, but they couldn't pinpoint the exact locations. Panic began to seep into their leadership once more. They had underestimated humanity once, and now their fleets were scattered, unprepared. But among their ranks, there were whispers too. Stories of ships disappearing without combat, entire patrols vanishing into static. The reports mentioned strange readings before the disappearances. Not human, not alien. Something else. Back aboard the flagship, the survivor's condition worsened. He spoke in broken phrases, sometimes using words no one understood. During one episode, he suddenly sat upright and whispered a string of coordinates, ones that pointed far beyond enemy territory to an uncharted region of space. When asked how he knew them, he only said, "They showed me." The scientists debated what to do. The coordinates didn't lead anywhere known, but something about them drew attention. The captain ordered a scout drone to investigate the area. It took several days for the signal to return, and when it did, the data was corrupted. The only clear image transmitted back showed a structure floating in the void, massive, dark, silent, and unlike anything human or alien. Then the transmission ended. The Fleet Council met again in secrecy. Some believed it was an enemy trap. Others thought it might hold the answers to what happened to the First Fleet. But the survivors' warning still echoed in their minds. You shouldn't have come back. That night, the captain walked through the observation deck alone. The stars stretched endlessly before him, cold and indifferent. He thought of the people who'd died in the first battle, of the families waiting on Earth, of what humanity had become since that day. For all their strength, they were still blind in the dark, still searching for meaning in the silence. The hum of the engines felt heavier now. Somewhere deep within the ship, the survivor stirred again. The medical sensors spiked for a moment before returning to normal. A low vibration rippled through the hull, subtle, almost like a breath. And then, through the static of the intercom, a faint voice whispered the same phrase again, but this time, not from the survivor's lips. You shouldn't have come back. The crew froze as alarms flickered to life. The ship's sensors picked up movement in the void ahead, something vast, larger than anything they had encountered before. It wasn't alien, it wasn't human, it was something entirely new. And as the lights dimmed, the captain realized the truth that no one wanted to face. The First Fleet hadn't been destroyed by the enemy. It had been silenced by something much worse. The question now wasn't whether humanity could win. It was whether they'd survive long enough to understand what they had awakened. The alarms kept echoing through the corridors, a low, pulsing sound that made the metal walls seem alive. Red lights flashed across the bridge as the crew scrambled to respond. The readings didn't make sense. There was movement out there, but no clear shape, no defined signature. It wasn't following the normal behavior of a ship. It was more like a shadow in motion. The captain ordered all systems to battle readiness, but deep down, no one was sure what they were preparing for. Through the viewport, the stars seemed to twist. For a moment, it looked as though space itself was bending, as if something unseen was distorting the light. The sensors kept flickering, one moment detecting a mass the size of a moon, the next showing nothing at all. The chief engineer checked the instruments again and again, certain it was a malfunction, but the pattern repeated. Whatever was out there, it wasn't natural. The fleet tightened formation. The tenfold ships spread out in a defensive pattern, their massive hulls glowing faintly as power surged through their weapon systems. Silence returned for a brief second. Then, just as quickly, the darkness ahead rippled. A faint outline appeared, something enormous, but translucent, like a mirage. It wasn't a ship in any traditional sense. It looked more like a structure made of light and shadow, moving without propulsion. The captain watched it carefully, his hands clenched behind his back. "Is it broadcasting anything?" he asked. The communications officer shook her head. No signal, no language pattern, no energy spikes. It's just there. Then, without warning, the survivor from the Vigilant began to scream. His body convulsed as the medical monitors blared. The medics rushed to stabilize him, but his voice cut through the noise. He was repeating something over and over, the same coordinates as before. But this time, he added more. The words came fast, half-coherent, mixing human speech with strange, rhythmic sounds that didn't belong to any known tongue. The medics recorded everything. Back on the bridge, the captain received the update. The coordinates he repeated matched the exact position of the unknown structure ahead. It wasn't a coincidence. Somehow, whatever that thing was, it was connected to him. The captain hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. The fleet's primary mission was retaliation, to strike at the alien empire, not to chase anomalies. But the alien threat seemed distant now, almost irrelevant compared to this. He gave the order to hold fire. The fleet's ships maintained their distance, scanning continuously. As the scans deepened, new details emerged. The structure wasn't made of metal. It was composed of energy fields, weaving in layers like threads. The readings suggested it wasn't entirely in normal space. Part of it existed somewhere else, in a dimension that human instruments could barely detect. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the structure moved. It didn't accelerate or drift. It simply shifted position, as if space folded around it. The crew stared in disbelief. A moment later, every ship in the fleet received the same signal simultaneously. It wasn't a language, not even a sound. It was more like a thought, a pressure in the mind. Some of the crew collapsed instantly, clutching their heads. Others froze, paralyzed by an emotion they couldn't describe. The computers recorded nothing but static. The captain fought to keep control. He ordered all ships to break formation and pull back. But something in the void didn't want them to leave. Gravity readings spiked, pulling them closer. Engines roared at maximum thrust, but the fleet barely moved. It was as if invisible hands were holding them in place. The communications channels filled with overlapping voices, crew from other ships shouting, calling for help, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then, without warning, the pull stopped. The readings returned to normal. The stars looked calm again. The structure was gone. But the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes before something worse. Aboard the flagship, the survivor had stopped breathing. The medical team tried to revive him, but his pulse was gone. The captain stood at the medbay window, expressionless. After everything that had happened, after the chaos and the fear, it felt like a grim conclusion. But as the medics prepared to declare time of death, the monitors flickered again. The body jerked once. Then his eyes opened. They were different now, glowing faintly, reflecting the same strange pattern the scanners had seen in the energy field. He spoke softly, but the voice wasn't his own. "They're not enemies," he said. "They're what's left." The crew froze. The captain stepped forward. "What do you mean? What's left of what?" But the man didn't answer. He stared blankly at the ceiling, whispering fragments of words that didn't fit together. The medics restrained him, but his vitals remained stable. Whatever had happened to him, he was no longer entirely human. As the ship drifted in silence, the captain sent encrypted reports back to Earth. But the transmissions were delayed. Something in deep space was interfering with their signals. Earth's command responded with limited data, ordering them to proceed with caution and maintain position until reinforcements arrived. But days passed, and no reinforcements came. Meanwhile, tension among the crew worsened. Some believed the survivor had been possessed by whatever intelligence controlled the structure. Others thought he was a messenger, a link between humanity and something ancient. Fights broke out in the lower decks. Rumors spread that some officers were hearing whispers in their sleep, voices speaking from the static of their comms. The engineers reported that the ship's power core occasionally flickered, releasing brief bursts of energy that matched the same unknown frequency as before. The science division tried to analyze the recordings of the encounter. Buried in the data was a hidden pattern, a repeating sequence that resembled both sound and code. When played through the ship's translation system, it formed a shape, almost like a symbol, repeating again and again. It wasn't alien, it wasn't human. It was something that predated both. The captain couldn't ignore it anymore. He convened a small team, scientists, engineers, and the communications officer, to analyze what the symbol could mean. After hours of cross-referencing ancient archives and signal records, one theory emerged. The structure might not be an enemy ship at all, but a remnant, a relic from a civilization that existed long before the current war, something that might have destroyed itself, leaving behind echoes trapped between dimensions. If that was true, then the First Fleet didn't die in battle. They were consumed by whatever this force was, absorbed or erased. The realization hit hard. Humanity had thought itself the aggressor now, striking back at the alien empire with power and fury. But maybe the real threat was something neither side understood, something both humans and aliens had stumbled into by accident. Then, the ship's long-range sensors detected movement again, but this time, not one signature. Hundreds. The alien empire was mobilizing. Massive fleets were forming at the edge of their territory, heading straight toward the human position. The celebration that once filled their cities was gone. They had seen the same anomaly on their side, and now they feared it too. The captain made his decision. Humanity couldn't fight both wars, not against the aliens and whatever this third presence was. He ordered a secret communication channel opened with the alien flagship, using an ancient emergency code meant for first contact diplomacy. It was a desperate move, one that could be seen as treason if Earth Command ever found out. But it was the only choice left. For hours, there was no response. Then finally, a faint signal came through. The voice that spoke wasn't human, but it was calm. "You saw it too," it said. "The thing in the dark." The captain nodded slowly, even though they couldn't see him. "Yes," he replied. "And I think it's coming for both of us." Static filled the line for several seconds. Then, the alien voice returned. "Then we have less time than we thought." The transmission ended abruptly. No coordinates, no plan, just that haunting sentence. On the bridge, the crew waited for the captain's next order. He looked at the stars, remembering the survivor's words. "They're what's left." It echoed in his mind like a warning. Whatever this force was, it wasn't finished with them. Somewhere out there, in the black silence between stars, the structure flickered back into existence. Faint at first, then brighter, and this time there wasn't just one. The darkness was starting to move. The air inside the flagship felt heavier now. Every sound, the hum of the engines, the low thrum of energy through the walls, seemed sharper, like the ship itself was holding its breath. The crew moved in silence, faces pale, eyes fixed on their screens. The scanners confirmed what no one wanted to believe. There were now 12 of the strange structures scattered across the edge of known space. They weren't stationary anymore. They were moving, slowly but steadily, toward both Earth and the alien empire. The captain stood at the center of the bridge, unmoving, watching the patterns unfold on the holographic map. Each of the structures pulsed with the same faint rhythm, like synchronized heartbeats. It wasn't random. It was coordinated. "They're communicating," the science officer whispered. The thought sent chills through everyone. If these things could communicate, then they were organized. And if they were organized, they had a purpose. The survivor from the Vigilant sat restrained in the medbay, his condition worsening. His eyes no longer looked human. They shimmered faintly, reflecting the same pulse as the approaching structures. Sometimes he whispered things that made no sense, Other times, his voice carried strange harmonics, like two people speaking at once. The medical team had long stopped trying to sedate him. Every time they did, the ship's systems flickered as if reacting to his heartbeat. Somehow he was connected to the anomaly outside. The captain visited him, standing by the glass, unsure whether he was looking at a man or a vessel for something else. "What are they?" he asked quietly. The survivor smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "They were here before us," he said. "Before you. Before them. Before anyone built ships or cities. They woke because we made too much noise." The captain didn't understand. "Are they alive?" he pressed. The man tilted his head. "Not like you think. They remember. That's what they do. They remember what was lost, and what should stay gone." That answer only deepened the fear. If these things were remnants of something ancient, then maybe the war between humans and aliens had drawn their attention. Two civilizations firing weapons powerful enough to tear open space itself might have disturbed whatever slept out there. The engineering teams reported something new. The deeper they scanned the structures, the more they found that each one contained a hollow core, like a massive chamber. The readings suggested movement inside, though it wasn't mechanical. It pulsed and changed form constantly. Some believed it was energy, others thought it was consciousness. The word living machine began to spread quietly through the fleet. Meanwhile, Earth Command finally broke the silence. Their delayed transmission arrived after hours of interference. The message was brief and coded. "Do not engage. Contain if possible. Defense priority, planet-side protection." That meant one thing: Earth was preparing for impact. They knew these entities weren't going to stop at the edge of space. The alien empire's fleets had also gathered near the border. Their massive warships glowed with cold light, engines humming like distant thunder. For the first time in history, both sides, human and alien, faced the same enemy. The communication link the captain had opened before was restored briefly. The alien commander's image appeared on the screen, features sharp and distant. "Our outer colonies are gone," he said. "They didn't attack. They erased everything. Space itself is folding where they move." The captain didn't reply right away. There were no words to match that kind of terror. "Then we stand together," he finally said. The alien gave a slow nod. "For now." Preparations began immediately. Human and alien ships formed a joint line of defense, a fragile alliance born out of fear. Engineers worked around the clock, merging technology that had once been used to destroy each other. On board the flagship, the atmosphere was tense but focused. Crews from both sides exchanged short glances through the communication feeds, bound by the same grim understanding. If they failed, there would be no survivors. As the hours passed, the structures continued to advance. The readings grew stranger with each scan. They weren't just moving, they were adapting. Each time the fleet changed formation, the entities mirrored it, as though studying them. The survivor in the medbay began muttering faster, his pulse perfectly synced with the movement outside. The lights dimmed every time his voice rose. Then the ship's proximity alarms went off. One of the structures had stopped moving. It hovered at the edge of the human-alien defense line, enormous and silent. The nearest ship sent out probes, but they were vaporized instantly, not by weapons, but by pure distortion. The space around the structure rippled like water, and then, for the first time, it emitted sound. It wasn't speech. It was a low, resonating tone that shook the entire fleet. Every system blinked off for a fraction of a second. Crew members fell to their knees, clutching their heads. On the bridge, the captain's display turned white with static, and in the center of it appeared a symbol. The same one the scientists had found hidden in the earlier data. A circle within a spiral, surrounded by fragments of light. "Shut it down!" someone yelled, but there was nothing to shut down. The sound wasn't coming through their systems. It was inside their minds. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. Silence fell. But outside, the structure was changing. The glowing lines on its surface began to twist, forming shapes that looked disturbingly familiar. Human faces, alien faces, distorted and merging. It was reflecting them, learning from them. The captain's stomach turned cold as he realized what it was doing. It wasn't just studying them. It was trying to become them. The communications officer's voice broke the silence. "Captain, the other 11 are moving faster now. They're converging on this location." That meant one thing. They were the target. The combined fleet prepared for the inevitable. Defense grids came online, weapons charged, shields layered in overlapping formations. The alien commander sent a final transmission across the shared channel. "If we fall, the rest of the galaxy follows." The captain didn't answer. There was no room left for speeches. Only survival. The first impact hit like thunder. One of the smaller human cruisers vanished instantly, consumed by a wave of light. The scanners went wild. No debris, no explosion, just nothing left. The fleet returned fire, unleashing every weapon they had. Beams of plasma and kinetic rounds struck the surface of the entity, but the energy simply dispersed, absorbed like rain into sand. The alien ships fired next, their energy weapons lighting the void. For a moment, the structure seemed to weaken, but then it pulsed once, brighter than a star, and the combined assault dissolved in seconds. Inside the flagship, the survivor screamed again, louder than ever. The glass around him cracked as his voice grew distorted, deeper, layered with something not human. The lights dimmed to red. The ship's AI reported that the reactor was spiking. Something was drawing energy directly from it. "He's feeding it!" one of the engineers shouted. The captain made a split-second decision. "Shut down the core, now!" But the system refused the command. The reactor had locked itself, responding to an external control. The pulse outside the ship matched perfectly with the rhythm of the survivor's heartbeat. The realization struck everyone at once. Whatever was controlling the structures wasn't just outside, it was already inside. On the main display, the other 11 entities had arrived, forming a perfect circle around the fleet. Each one pulsed in sequence, creating a field of light that began to close in. The alien commander's voice came through the channel again, strained and filled with static. "They're sealing us in." Panic spread across the bridge, but the captain remained still, eyes fixed on the shrinking ring of light. He knew that if they didn't break free now, they would be erased, just like the First Fleet. He opened the internal channel. "Engineering, override everything. Manual control. Use the engines as a weapon if you have to." The engines roared, straining against the growing pressure. The ship trembled violently, metal groaning as the gravitational pull intensified. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Through the viewport, the captain saw space itself bending, the stars stretching into lines. For a heartbeat, everything went still, and then the flagship lurched forward, tearing through the collapsing barrier. Half the fleet followed. The rest disappeared behind them, swallowed by the light. When the flagship finally stabilized, there was silence again. The stars looked wrong, darker, distant, unfamiliar. The navigation system couldn't locate their position. They were somewhere else entirely. But before anyone could speak, the communications panel flickered on. A faint signal was coming through, weak, broken, but unmistakable. It was Earth Command, and the message was chillingly short. "They're here." The captain turned toward the viewport, and far away, across the emptiness, the blue shimmer of Earth glowed faintly against the black. But something else was moving toward it. 12 shadows, drifting like ghosts, growing larger with every passing second. And for the first time, no one aboard said a word. The bridge was silent except for the faint hum of the engines and the hollow throb of the crew's fear. Earth hung ahead of them, small and blue against the vast, dark, fragile, and unaware. The transmission from command still echoed in their ears, those two words no one wanted to hear. "They're here." No one knew what "here" meant exactly, but everyone felt it. It wasn't just about distance anymore, it was something closer, heavier, like a storm pressing on their chests. The captain stood motionless, eyes fixed on the growing shapes between them and home. The 12 entities drifted closer, moving with that same eerie grace, silent, deliberate, unstoppable. They weren't attacking yet. They were just watching. The tactical officer whispered, "Why aren't they firing?" But no one answered. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Earth Command sent another message, scrambled through interference. Most of it was static, but fragments came through. Energy fields forming, communication attempts, distortion across orbit. The message cut out before it could finish. That alone terrified everyone more than words could. The captain ordered the fleet to begin approach. Engines flared, pushing the ships toward home. But halfway there, the stars around them flickered, just for a moment, like someone had dimmed reality itself. Then the sensors started reading multiple Earths. 12 of them layered over each other like mirages, each one slightly off, slightly distorted. The crew gasped as their navigation systems went haywire. "They're fracturing space," the science officer murmured. "Reality itself is duplicating." The entities weren't just approaching Earth, they were rewriting it. As panic spread, the survivor in the med bay began speaking again. Only this time, not in whispers. His voice echoed through every comm channel, even the ones disconnected from the ship's systems. It wasn't his tone anymore. It was deeper, colder, layered with something mechanical. "They remember the pattern," the voice said. "They built the stars before you were born. And now you have broken their silence." The captain stormed into the med bay, shouting for the feed to be cut, but nothing worked. The voice was in every system, every speaker. The man on the bed sat upright, his movements stiff and unnatural. The lights around him pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. His eyes were pure light now. "They wanted peace," he said, his words calm and terrifyingly certain. "You brought war to their grave, and now they will make sure it never happens again." A wave of static filled the room. Every screen on the ship flashed white for a split second. When the visuals returned, the survivor was gone. His restraints were empty. Security teams searched every corridor, but there was no trace of him. The captain called for a full lockdown, but before it could be carried out, the ship's systems began shifting on their own. Lights dimmed, engines pulsed erratically, and navigation controls changed coordinates. The flagship was no longer flying itself. It was being flown. The science officer ran diagnostics. "Something's overriding the core AI," she said, voice trembling. "It's rewriting its own code." On her screen, lines of unknown data scrolled faster than human eyes could follow. Every time she tried to shut it down, it simply moved somewhere else, like it was alive. The captain ordered a manual shutdown, but even that failed. "It's using our systems to communicate," she said finally. "It's speaking through the ship." The holographic display flared to life. A form began to take shape. Not the survivor, not the entities, but something abstract. A shifting silhouette of light and shadow, almost human, but never still. It spoke through the static. "You should have listened," it said. "The first fleet was not destroyed, it was changed." The captain's throat tightened. "What do you mean, changed?" The shape flickered, and suddenly the main screen displayed dozens of images, recordings from the First Fleet's final battle, ships breaking apart, energy waves surging through their hulls. But this time, the footage didn't end in silence. Instead, fragments of those destroyed ships drifted into the glow of one of the ancient structures, and then, piece by piece, they began to rebuild themselves, not as human ships, not as alien vessels, but as something new, something alive. The voice continued. "Your fleet did not die. It evolved. They became the first of us." The room went still. It wasn't just the entities that had survived. The first human fleet had become part of them, absorbed, fused into whatever consciousness these structures carried. That explained the strange energy readings, the human-like faces on their surfaces, the faint echoes of human code in their signals. They weren't invaders. They were the ghosts of humanity's own creation. The captain staggered back, his mind spinning. If they were once human, why attack Earth? The voice darkened, its tone shifting. Because Earth kept calling. The lights flickered again, and the image of Earth on the main screen changed. It zoomed in, through the atmosphere, through the clouds, until the view centered on a massive facility buried beneath the Pacific Ocean. The captain recognized it immediately. The command archives had mentioned it once, a classified research site known as the Abyss Array. Officially, it was a deep-sea energy collector. In truth, it was a prototype of something more dangerous, a weapon designed to bend gravitational fields, a weapon humanity never admitted it built. The science officer whispered, "That's what woke them up. The first fleet must have tested the array's energy near Jupiter." The voice on the screen seemed to hear her. "You tore open what should have stayed closed, and now the echoes come for you." The realization hit like a punch. Humanity wasn't just a bystander in this disaster. They were the cause. Their own experiment had ripped into whatever dimension these entities existed in. The war that followed had only made it worse. Outside, the entities began to move again, circling Earth like slow-moving moons. But instead of attacking, beams of light stretched from them toward the planet. Each beam connected to a point along the surface, 12 in total. The pattern wasn't random. The coordinates matched ancient ley lines, power grids that had once been myth. They were building something. The alien commander came through the channel again, his voice harsh. "They're creating a barrier. If it completes, no energy, no life, no signal will escape that planet again." The captain turned to his crew. "They're sealing Earth off." The tactical officer's hands shook as he scanned the readings. "Captain, there's something else. The energy is identical to what we're seeing in our reactor. If they finish this field, everything inside will—" The ship shook violently before he could finish. One of the alien dreadnoughts had opened fire, trying to break the formation. But the moment its weapons hit the beam, the dreadnought vanished. No explosion, no debris, just silence. The voice on the ship returned, colder now. "We do not destroy, we correct." That was the breaking point. The captain knew the alliance wouldn't hold. The aliens were panicking, scattering, firing blindly into the dark. Half their ships disappeared within minutes, swallowed by distortion. The remaining human vessels tried to regroup, but their communications broke down as the energy field spread. In the chaos, the captain made a choice that would change everything. "Set course for the Abyss Array," he ordered. "If that's what started this, maybe it's the only thing that can stop it." The helmsman hesitated. "Sir, if we get closer, the gravitational pull—" "I know," the captain cut him off. "Do it." The flagship dove toward Earth, engines screaming as space around it warped and twisted. Through the viewport, the beams of light looked like enormous pillars connecting the heavens to the oceans below. The ship's hull groaned, but it held. Every second closer made the interference worse. Systems flickered, controls lagged, and voices echoed through the comms, voices of lost crew, distorted memories of the First Fleet. Then, amid the chaos, the medbay camera came back online. The survivor stood there again, somehow returned, his face calm, almost human again. He looked straight into the camera, and his words sent chills through everyone on board. "You're too late," he said softly. "They're not trying to destroy Earth. They're trying to erase time itself." The screen went black. Outside, the ocean beneath them began to glow. The Abyss Array was activating by itself. And for the first time since the beginning of the war, the captain realized the truth. The real enemy wasn't the aliens, or even the ancient entities. It was something Earth had built and forgotten to fear. The ship trembled as it entered the upper atmosphere, metal groaning under the weight of invisible forces. The clouds burned orange outside the viewport, flashing with unnatural lightning. The captain gripped the command rail, eyes fixed on the growing light below, the abyss array. It pulsed like a living heart, every beat shaking the planet and the fleet above it. "Status?" he demanded, but no one answered at first. The air was heavy, filled with static and tension, as if the ship itself was afraid to speak. Finally, the science officer's voice broke through. "The array's field is expanding exponentially. If it keeps growing, it'll merge with the energy from the entity's beams. The resulting feedback could wipe out every electronic system on the planet." She paused. Or worse, collapse the space around it. The captain's jaw tightened. "Can we shut it down manually?" "Maybe, but it's not responding to remote commands. We'd have to go inside." The crew fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The array wasn't built for human access during operation. Its core chamber was a swirling storm of gravity and radiation. Anyone who went in wouldn't come back out. The captain didn't hesitate. "Prepare a drop team." The tactical officer stepped forward, shaking his head. "Sir, if you go down there—" "I started this mission," the captain interrupted. "I'll finish it." He turned to the viewport one last time. The alien ships were falling back, retreating from the spreading light. Only a few human vessels remained, holding position above the ocean. Earth Command's final transmission came through the static. "All units, do whatever it takes to protect the planet." The message cut out again, swallowed by interference. Moments later, the drop shuttle launched, slicing through the burning clouds. The view outside was almost beautiful, like the world was ending in slow motion. Thunder rolled across the ocean as the array came into full view. It was massive, stretching across the seafloor like a metallic flower, its petals turning toward the light. Energy rippled from its center, bending the waves above it into spirals. As the shuttle descended, the pilot shouted, "The field's distorting the instruments! We're going in blind!" The ship spun violently as gravity shifted, but they managed to level out at the last second, crashing into the waves near the structure. Steam hissed as the water boiled around them. The captain unstrapped and grabbed his helmet. "Move!" They climbed out onto the slick surface of the array, the metal humming beneath their feet. Every step vibrated through their bodies like a pulse. The captain could feel it. Something alive beneath the machinery, something aware of them. They followed the path to the central access point, where a circular hatch glowed faint blue. "Override in progress," said the engineer, working furiously on her wrist console. The hatch opened with a deep metallic sigh, revealing a narrow descent lit by flickering lights. Inside, the deeper they went, the more unstable everything became. Gravity shifted sideways. The air itself seemed to ripple. At one point, their flashlights caught a glimpse of something embedded in the walls. Shapes like faces, human and not, frozen mid-expression. The engineer whispered, "Are those—" "Keep moving," the captain said sharply. He didn't want to think about it. They reached the core chamber at last, a vast open space with a glowing sphere suspended in the center. Energy arced across the room, connecting the sphere to the surrounding walls. The floor was covered in strange markings, patterns that looked both ancient and digital, like alien code mixed with human design. "This is it," the science officer said, eyes wide. "That's the core. If we can overload its containment field, we might be able to collapse it before it merges with the other beams." The captain nodded. "Do it." The engineer set to work, connecting her console to the nearest port. But before she could finish, the entire chamber pulsed, and the lights dimmed. A voice echoed around them, the same voice that had spoken through the ship before. "You still don't understand." The captain turned slowly toward the source, and his heart nearly stopped. The survivor stood at the edge of the platform, unharmed, calm, his eyes glowing faint gold. He looked more human now, but his presence carried an otherworldly weight. You think this was about war, he said softly. It was never war. It was restoration. The captain's voice was hoarse. Restoration of what? The balance you broke, the man replied. This array, your weapon, it doesn't just generate power. It connects worlds. You tore open a door that should have stayed closed. The ones you call entities are not conquerors. They are what remains of the old builders trying to seal what you unleashed. The science officer stared at him. Then why attack Earth? Why kill millions? They didn't. His gaze darkened. The energy you drew here amplified every signal, every reaction. You turned their attempt to heal into destruction. The engineer froze mid-command. Wait, she said slowly, eyes on her readings. If that's true, then overloading the core will destroy everything, the survivor finished for her. You'll erase the bridge, but also yourselves. The captain's mind raced. There has to be another way. There is, the man said, but it will cost you more than you think. The room shook violently, beams of light slicing through the air as the entity's energy from above began to merge with the array's core. The ocean outside boiled, and through the shaking metal walls, they could hear the roar of the storm. Time was running out. The captain stepped closer. Tell me what to do. You must stabilize the field, not destroy it, the man said. But it requires a link, a mind to bridge both sides, a human consciousness strong enough to hold the pattern. The captain hesitated. You mean someone has to stay here? The man nodded. Someone has to become part of it. The crew protested immediately. Sir, no, the science officer shouted. There has to be another option. But the captain had already made his choice. If this saves Earth, it's worth it. He walked to the core, feeling the pull of its energy. The survivor stepped aside, his expression unreadable. When the link begins, you'll see everything, he said quietly. Don't fight it. The captain placed his hand on the control node. Pain surged through him instantly, but he held on. The energy wrapped around his arm, spreading through his body, into his mind. He felt himself dissolving, becoming part of the light, part of the pattern. Memories flooded his thoughts. Earth, the First Fleet, the war, faces of the lost. And beyond that, he saw the builders, the ancient ones, vast and luminous, creating worlds from light. He saw the moment humanity's weapon had shattered the veil between realms. And he saw the entities, not as monsters, but as fragments of something once whole, trying to mend the wound. The core flared, the array's hum deepening into a single resonant tone. The beams from space began to change color, shifting from blinding white to soft gold. One by one, the entities halted their motion, their energy fields synchronizing with the array's rhythm. The chaos above Earth began to fade. Then the survivor spoke again, his voice breaking through the storm. It's working, but it's too much for one mind. The engineer looked up at the screen. He won't survive. The survivor shook his head slowly. No, he will become the bridge. The chamber exploded with light. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. No pain, no fear, just peace. When the light faded, the array had gone dark. The ocean was calm again. The alien ships drifted silently above, no longer hostile. The surviving human vessels received a final transmission, a voice they recognized instantly. It was the captain, but his tone was different, layered, calm, like the voice of the stars themselves. It's done. The link is stable. The wound is sealed. The crew fell silent, tears filling their eyes. Then, just before the transmission ended, he added one final line, one that sent a chill through everyone who heard it. They're not leaving. They're waiting. Above Earth, the entities began to drift outward, not vanishing, not retreating, just forming a wide ring around the planet, a quiet, glowing shield. Humanity was safe, but not alone. The survivor stood on the array's platform, watching the sky turn from fire to blue. A faint smile crossed his face. He made the right choice, he murmured. Then he looked down at the calm sea and whispered, almost to himself, "But the bridge, it doesn't close forever." Far above, deep in orbit, a small pulse of light flickered from the dark side of the moon, an echo of the array's energy. It was faint, barely detectable, but it was there, and it was growing. For days after the light faded, Earth was silent. The skies cleared, the ocean calmed, and for the first time in years, there was no signal of war. The array beneath the Pacific had gone still, its once blinding energy now a soft blue glow beneath the waves. The human fleet, battered and scarred, hovered in orbit waiting for orders that would never come. Earth Command's last message was weeks old, and communications across the system were fractured. It felt like the world was holding its breath again, but this time not out of fear. It was something closer to awe. The alien fleet, those who survived, did not retreat. They stayed in formation just beyond the atmosphere, motionless. Their weapons powered down, their engines silent. Every scan showed the same readings. No aggression, no energy buildup, only quiet observation. For a while, humanity didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. But no further attacks came. The great ring of light around Earth, the entity's formation, remained steady, glowing faintly like a protective halo. The war was over, but the meaning of victory was something no one could quite define. On the surface, people slowly began to emerge from bunkers and shelters. Cities damaged by the earlier waves of destruction flickered back to life. Power grids stabilized as strange bursts of energy from the array began feeding directly into the planet's atmosphere. Crops started growing again faster than before, and the climate, so long damaged by human hands, showed signs of self-correction. The scientists called it impossible, but it was happening. It was as if Earth itself was healing. Rumors spread quickly across the surviving networks. Some said the entities were still communicating through radio signals too faint for normal receivers. Others claimed that people near the coasts could hear a hum at night, a low melody carried by the wind, as though the planet was singing back to its creators. But among all the uncertainty, one truth held firm. The captain had become something more than human. The last transmission from the Abyss Array had been archived and analyzed by every command center left standing. His voice, calm, almost serene, still sent chills through anyone who listened. "It's done," he had said. "The link is stable. The wound is sealed." For some, those words meant the end of conflict. For others, they sounded like a warning. Weeks later, a recovery team was sent to the array. They descended through the calm ocean, through layers of strange blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The structure below was no longer mechanical. Its sharp metal edges had softened, reshaped into smooth curves covered with patterns resembling coral or bone. It was alive, in some way they couldn't explain. When the team reached the core chamber, they found no trace of the captain or the survivor. Only a single symbol remained etched into the floor, an infinity loop, glowing faintly. The lead scientist recorded her findings. "It's dormant," she said. "But it's aware. The array isn't a weapon anymore, it's a bridge, just like he said." Her voice trembled slightly as she added, "And it's listening." The government, what was left of it, declared the site off limits. The area was renamed the Pacific Shield, and access was restricted to a handful of researchers. Yet despite all their attempts to contain it, the array continued to emit low-frequency energy that blanketed the entire planet. It wasn't harmful. If anything, it was stabilizing the magnetic field, protecting Earth from solar storms and radiation. The entity's ring above acted as a further layer of defense, a living barrier. Humanity, it seemed, had been forgiven. But the story didn't end there. Months later, deep space probes began picking up something new, an echo from beyond the solar system. The signal pattern was unmistakable. It matched the array's frequency exactly. When decoded, the message was short, only 3 words repeated over and over. "The bridge holds." That phrase spread across every channel, every colony, every outpost still connected to Earth. People debated what it meant. Some believed it was the captain's way of telling them that the balance between worlds had been restored. Others feared it meant the connection to the other realm was still open, that the entities were not gone but waiting for humanity to prove itself. Either way, the message gave people something they hadn't had in years: hope. On the moon, the faint pulse of light discovered after the battle had grown brighter. Scientists built an observation base near it, trying to understand its purpose. They found fragments of the First Fleet's ships scattered across the lunar surface, but when they examined the debris, something strange happened. The materials began to hum, resonating with the same tone as the array beneath the ocean. It was as if the old fleet was awakening again, piece by piece. Back on Earth, life returned to a kind of fragile normal. Cities rebuilt. Children were born who would never know the fear of the invasion. The stars no longer looked like a battlefield. They looked like a promise. Yet even as humanity rebuilt, the question lingered. What had they become part of? The captain's transformation, the array's awakening, the ring of light, all of it felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. One night, a team stationed at the Pacific Shield detected a voice coming through the water. It was faint, carried through vibrations rather than sound. The technicians amplified it until the words became clear. "Keep building," it said. "Do not forget." The voice was unmistakably the captain's, though deeper, blended with other tones, human and not. The message repeated once, then faded. After that, something remarkable began happening around the world. Structures and machines started resonating with the array's frequency. Power stations ran cleaner, satellites synchronized automatically, even damaged spacecraft seemed to repair themselves faster. Humanity's technology was subtly changing, evolving under an influence they couldn't fully explain. Scientists called it quantum harmonization, but many simply called it a gift. The alien fleet, too, began to depart one by one. Their ships didn't vanish or warp away like before. They simply drifted toward the far edge of the solar system, leaving behind trails of golden light. It was clear now they weren't enemies at all. They were guardians, ensuring the bridge held. The last alien ship paused just beyond Mars, turned once toward Earth, and then faded into the dark. Years passed. The Pacific Shield became a site of pilgrimage. People came not for science or power, but for peace. They said standing near it made them feel connected, to the planet, to each other, to something greater. It wasn't religion, it was remembrance. Humanity had learned what it meant to reach too far and what it cost to restore what was broken. In the end, the world did not forget the captain. His name became a symbol of unity, a reminder that sometimes sacrifice was the only way forward. The message he left behind, "They're not leaving, they're waiting," remained engraved on the monument built above the ocean. But over time, its meaning changed. It no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a promise that humanity wasn't alone in the universe, and that somewhere out there, the ones who built the stars were watching still. And then, decades later, a quiet night over the Pacific brought one last miracle. The ocean's surface began to glow faintly again, the same calm blue that had appeared after the battle. From the depths rose a single beam of light that stretched into the sky, piercing through the clouds before fading into the stars. There was no explosion, no fear, just that soft hum, the same melody that people had once heard in the wind. Satellites recorded a brief signal moments after the light faded. It came from both the array and the far edge of the solar system at the same time, perfectly synchronized. The message contained no words, only a pulse, a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of a human. Then it stopped. The world watched the skies for weeks, but nothing else happened. Slowly, life went on again. Farmers tended their fields, children played in the streets, scientists studied the stars. Yet sometimes, on still nights, the ocean would shimmer faintly, and those who listened closely swore they could hear a whisper, soft and distant. It wasn't a threat, nor a command. It was simply a voice saying, "We remember." And somewhere far beyond the reach of light, among the ruins of ancient stars, a faint glow pulsed in answer, steady, alive, and eternal. The bridge still held. Humanity had survived, changed forever, and in the silence between worlds, peace had finally found its home.